I brought you a story tonight. I had so much trouble deciding what story to bring for you tonight. And then I thought, I need a story about humans. I need a story about what can happen to humans. It's a story about a very young couple, not very long ago and not very far away from here. Two young people, a husband and a wife, with incredibly busy lives. You know, he had a job that kept him traveling around the world, and he did like his job. He loved meeting all the different people. She spent a lot of time at home, but she had her little eBay trading business, you know, in the back bedroom at home. They had 2.4 children, and a few times a month they actually met to hand over the children for I know, football or drama club or all the stuff that kids do. When they actually, the husband and wife, actually slept together in the same bed, I mean, they slept. It's worse than hearing me tell stories. They were exhausted. Within the woman were an unsung song and an untold story. Now, it could have been that the story and this song were in the man. You know, even men are capable of creativity. It just happened that these things were within the woman's heart and mind. And sometimes when she was driving down the road, you know, in the car, you're on your own. You can practice your singing, and there's no one there to criticize you. Well, this song that was bubbling and building inside the woman, and she had most of the words and most of the tune, and she'd start singing that song out in the car as she zoomed down the motorway. And then, of course, being a sensible person, she had her hands-free mobile phone, and it would go, and because the message might be about the kids or her husband or the business or the school or something, she had to stop singing and take the call. Sometimes at home, in the little office in the spare bedroom, there would be all of an hour between the end of one eBay auction and the start of the next one. So she would say, oh, wow, I can start typing out this story, because the plot and the characters and the theme and the details, the juicy little details, were all building and bubbling in her mind. So she did that thing that writers have to do. She'd open up a new document and write the title, because it's always the blank page that is terrifying. If you write the title, it is less scary. And she would be ready. Her fingers would be poised over the keyboard. Words would be ready to pour out of her fingertips. And then the computer went, bing! You've got mail. And thank you. Because that message might be about the business, or it might be about the kids, or it might be about her husband, or it might be about something that she really had to pay attention to, she'd close the document and never write the story and get back into the work. And the weeks and the months went by, and she never got that story out, and she never sang that song. And the song and the story inside the woman realized, oh yeah, they were conscious. The song and the story inside the woman realized they were causing her stress. So the song and the story jumped out of the woman and turned themselves into a hat and a coat, and hung themselves on a peg in the hallway, a hat and a coat hanging on the peg in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs, and nobody noticed. And then the husband set off on another business trip. When he got to the airport, his flight was cancelled. His flight was so cancelled, he couldn't get a plane or a train or a camel to where he thought he was supposed to be going. And he was just about to phone the office and rearrange his entire week's schedule when the thought came to him, he didn't have to go anywhere. He could go right home and have an entire week with his wife and children. So he didn't make any phone calls at all. He just threw his case in the back of the car and drove. Now their little house was on one of the new estates out near you know how they're building all around the Cotswold villages? Their house was on one of those. By the time he got back into the Cotswolds and back to the little housing estate, it was gone 10:30 at night. So the place was as silent as the grave. And he drove up to the house and he let himself in. He'd seen the light on in the spare bedroom. He knew his wife would be doing her trading thing and possibly on the phone to America, because that time of night, that's when you talk across the Atlantic. And he let himself in and he put his case down, and there was a strange hat and a strange coat, a man's hat and coat, hanging on pegs in the hallway. So the husband stomped upstairs. He went into the spare bedroom and he said, "Whose hat and whose coat is that down there in the hallway? Who have you got here in the house?" And she said, "Will you be quiet? I'm on the phone." And he wouldn't be quiet and he wouldn't shut up, and he started shouting at her, and she had to end the conversation really quickly, and she was really embarrassed, and a huge row exploded between the pair of them. And he accused her, and she had the foggiest what he was going on about, and he wouldn't believe her. And it ended with him storming downstairs and slamming out of the house. Well, 10:45 going on 11 p.m. in a Cotswold village, there is nothing happening, because of course there's no pub, there's no nothing. He couldn't go round to any of their friends. The only thing he could think to do was to walk into the old part of the village, to the little old church. Now I have to tell you, this young man was not a brilliant churchgoer. He would go to the nativity play to watch his children muddle their lines. He would go to the harvest festival because that speaks to all of us. But he did know where they kept the spare key, because we have to lock our churches at night, even in the Cotswolds. He found the spare key and he let himself in, and the big old door creaked open, and he walked into the smell of mouldering hassocks. And he walked down the aisle. He hadn't done that for a long time. He walked down the aisle and sat himself down in the front pew, and he was still stewing over that row. And you know how 20 minutes after you've finished a row, you can think of the perfect answer. You've got all the things that you should have said. And he was reviewing it and thinking about how he really could have made his point. And he sat there stewing over that for quite some time. In fact, until the church clock struck midnight. And behind him, the old door creaked open again. And he turned and he looked, and there was a cloud of lights. A little swarm of golden, blue, silver, yellow, quivering, dancing, swirling lights. You see, what you might not know if you don't live in the Cotswolds. There's this thing that happens at midnight every night in the Cotswolds. All the lamps that have been switched off, all the lights that have been turned out, all the candle flames that have been extinguished, all those lights gather in the local church, and they bring with them the gossip from that day in the village. And the husband was sitting there on the front pew. And this swarm of lights came sizzling and swirling and chuckling and chattering down the aisle past him. And they were talking about what had happened in the village that day. Poor little Alison, fallen off the swing, broken her arm again. That would cause questions in A&E. Mrs. Jones had been shortchanged on the bus, and there'd been that terrible row at number 37. And the husband had to sit there and listen to the action replay every word that had been exchanged between the husband and his wife. And of course, the whole story came out about the unsung song and the untold story that had left the woman and turned themselves into that hat and that coat. And when all the gossip was finished, with one last flickering, glittering swirl and sizzle, all the lights gathered over the altar and shot up to heaven and told the Lord likes a bit of gossip. The husband left the church, locked the door, hid the key, went home. He let himself in. The only light now was a glimmer under the bedroom door at the top of the stairs. Quickly and quietly, the husband went into the bedroom, and he saw his wife sitting up in bed with a book open in front of her on the quilt and the bedside lamp on beside her. But she couldn't have been reading. Her eyes were too sore from crying. Very, very gently, the husband sat himself down on the quilt near his wife, and he reached out and softly took her hands into his own, and he said to her, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry to have spoken to you as I did. And I understand, I remember about your song and your story. And I want to hear you. I want you to tell me your story. I want you to sing me your song. When you and I were courting, we had all the time in the world to sing to each other, to tell each other stories. What happened? What happened to our lives? That all we do is communicate by email and Facebook and satellite message. Where have our lives gone? What's happened to our love? I want to hear you. I want to hear you." The wife looked her husband straight in the eye, and though she did not take her hands from his, she did shake her head, and she said, with a voice full of doubt, she said, "I am not sure. I am no longer sure that I can remember any stories. I am no longer sure that I can sing any songs. But I think I might be willing to try." And the husband and the wife sat there in the small glow of the bedside lamp, holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes. And down in the gloom of the hallway, the hat and the coat waited, hoping but not sure of anything, because this story could still go either way.
There we are, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.